Okay, so last time we talked about, and I know I'm pronouncing him incorrectly, but Ananias, and how I felt like he was such a hero because when the Lord called on him, that he just immediately said, "Here I am," without hesitation, totally opened himself up to whatever the Lord was calling him to do. And in a time in which that was a huge challenge, not that it's not a huge challenge for us at any point in time, but that it's a huge challenge then because it was a time of great persecution. And so for him to just instantly be able to say that to me was just a very heroic act. And so I have thought about it a lot, and those three words, "Here I am," is what now I try to start my day with in the morning. And the morning is the toughest time for me. I think it's the time when, most people I think at night when they go to bed, that's when they have all the thoughts come in. But for me, it's in the morning that I have so many thoughts rushing in that are most likely out of habit and are not for the greater good, for myself or for anything. And so I have had to recognize that, and then you need to replace it with something. And so now I'm just, as soon as I start hearing that path, down that path, I just stop and I say, "Here I am." So now I'm trying to be even preemptive with it. The moment I the moment I'm trying to immediately say, "Here I am," and to make that a habit. And even if it's just the words, even if I'm not at the point where my heart and my body and my mind is open to that, I think just taking that intention, that action of saying, "Here I am," kind of starts to crack that door open, where then we can start practicing that presence of having God with us throughout the day. And I want to thank Randy so much for the little book, because I don't know if you've gotten it yet, but it's really tiny, which at first I was like, man, that's really small. But I love it because it's camp size. And so this was what I spent most of my alone time at the campsite with, was this little book, and reading it and feeling the essence of Brother Lawrence. And so maybe accumulation of last week's lesson or the week before, where it was "Here I am," and having that openness, and then reading how Brother Lawrence got to the point where he was always in the constant state of "Here I am." And that the word in the title here is practice. And there's different connotations to practice, but practice to me, pardon me, practice to me means that we don't necessarily, why do we practice? We practice to get better at something. To me, when we practice, we're not expecting perfection. It's a starting point. It's a point where we can grow from. And because of that, then it sort of takes the pressure off. Because I don't know about you, but sometimes when you read what we're supposed to be doing and feeling in the Bible, or in our meditations, or in our Tai Chi practice even, you just feel like, gosh, I should have this. And I should be able to acquire this now. and I'm like that as well. But in truth, it's all practice. And it's just the next level, the next level, the next level. And what's interesting is, as a musician, as a professional musician, the word practice, and practice was integral part of our life and our day. So I literally practiced 6 to 8 hours a day on my instrument. And sometimes it was just a drag. I mean, sometimes I just had to really have a lot of discipline to drag myself in that practice room and to practice. But it was so understood that that's what we needed to do to be able to be a good musician and to get the job, to get the gig. And I wonder if we approached our Christianity that way, that we realized that we should be practicing. And not in the terms of, a musician from a survival standpoint, but really maybe so. Maybe we need to have that urgency to it. That it is a matter of survival. It's survival of our soul. It's survival of every cell in our body, and leading an inspired life rather than an oppressed life. I mean, don't we all want that? And so I really like the little book, because it talks about the practice of the presence of God, and that we don't have to have this, instantly. We shouldn't have to put pressure on ourselves if we fail, because guess what? That's what practice is for. It's to eliminate or to reduce that, to have systems in place, so that when we are challenged, those systems in place can kick in. A fine example is, if I practice a musical piece to go perform it, I practice it and practice it and practice it and practice until almost it becomes automatic in me. Because I know that when I go out on the stage, I'm going to be very nervous. And those nerves are going to decrease my performance level. I mean, there's just no way around it. But if you're cognizant of that, you know that, then you know the purpose of your practice. And the purpose of the practice is to make as much as you can automatic, so that when you have an interference, which would be the nerves, then you can still perform at a high level. And wouldn't that be great if we could do that for our practice of our faith, of our Christianity, of our day-to-day being in the presence of God? Not just thinking about it or praying and then moving on, but that it's in everything we do. And then when we are challenged by something in life, then we have some automatic systems already in place we don't have to think about, that help us get past, so that we're still performing in a high level of communion with God, even in those challenging times. I mean, really, that's the time we need it the most. But I don't know about you, but those often are the times that I turn away or I forget. Yeah. So let's practice little bits and pieces throughout the day of being in the presence of God, and do it in small increments and not being judgmental about it, and just building it into the day. I think the best way to do exercise, I've always said this to my patients, the best way to do exercise when you're working is to build it into your day, into your life, into your work life. So don't go to the gym. Just if you work between the first and second floor, then take the steps, take the stairs, do it so that it becomes an integral part of your day. And so can we do that with practicing the presence of God and making it an integral part of our day? Even if it's just for a minute here and there, it gets better and better and better. So my first step in that direction is by saying, here I am, when I wake up in the morning. And then for me, I found that one of my habits, and it becomes exaggerated when I'm stressed or when I'm in a new uncertain circumstance, but is to, for lack of a better word, kind of manhandle things. And I started to realize this in a physical way. Like, for example, when I'm setting up my camp, and things are always not where you want them to be when you're camping, and they're at the bottom of the bin. The pan is at the bottom of the bin, and the butter is in another bin in the bottom of the cooler. So it's always where where it's a struggle to get to. And so I found that my habit is to get a sense of urgency, and then I pile on a little frustration with that, and then on top of that, then I just dig and yank. And it was constant, and it was just, I realized that maybe this is my constant approach, and that awareness made me more aware of even how I do that at home. Like if I can't get something out of a drawer, rather than approach it in a different way, I'm just muscling it out, so to speak. And maybe I approach other things like that, maybe my business, who knows? So I think I'm not alone in this. And so I started through the inspiration of reading Brother Lawrence and about how he wants to recognize that God's with us all of the time. And one of the imageries that he talked about is that he envisions, of course you have to remember this is written in the 1600s, but he envisions God as this king, and instead of a harsh ruler, he's a kind king, and that even with Brother Lawrence's shortcomings and mistakes and sins, that he comes to this king and he says, he says, here I am. Do with me what you need to do with me. I know I'm so imperfect and I've messed up so much. And rather than the king delivering punishment, I love this, the king gently caresses him. And it was that all these words, humble and soft and gentle and loving and caressing, that woke up my heart a little bit in a way that allowed more of here I am into me, into my day. And so I thought, I caught myself. So I'm wrestling to get this rope out, that I need to use, and I'm wrestling it out of the bottom of the bin, and I'm feeling that tightness and that urgency, and me taking control and fighting gravity and fighting the circumstance. And then I thought, I just imagined joining, I know this sounds silly, but it was a metaphor, but it worked. Joining with God and taking this gentle caressing approach. And all of a sudden I just felt like, the simplest task, taking a rope out of a bin, I felt this love come through me, and I softened my grip and my approach, and the rope just slipped right out, just came out. So surprising. And so that was practice ground. It was a tangible, I needed a tangible. So that was a tangible practice ground for me. So that first I could monitor myself. Every time I started gotta get this thing out, then I was able to go, whoop, and then practice the presence of God and that gentle, caressing, soft approach. And I felt almost like a partnership, a companionship. And every time, without fail, whatever it was I was doing just practically fell out in front of me with hardly any effort. And then it made me realize, how many times in my past, my whole life I'm spending doing this. And that's in part why I was drawn to Tai Chi, because I knew down deep that Tai Chi is a complete opposite of how I operated in life. And so I felt I needed this new experience that was so different than me. But even now I'm still learning and bringing this into a different way. And so it gave me a really nice practice loop, if you will, of being able to do this kind of work of practicing, and in a physical way, because I'm a kinesthetic person. I needed something tangible and physical. And then it was so rewarding. The other thing is I started to really notice, how many times my mind is just not here I am. I was just stunned. I couldn't sustain here I am for 15 seconds. And I consider myself to be a little bit more, advanced in that area, just with the work that I do. But 15 seconds. And so I'm reading the book, and and my mind wanders off. And then I come back and I read the book, and my mind wanders off, and this book. And then I came back and it said, the sentence said, and when you become distracted away from God, He reminds you in the most supernatural ways. And just then, a flock of geese, I heard their wings first. I heard the wind in their wings. And then I thought, what's that? And they flew right over. I had to laugh. I laughed because it was right on cue. It was like just as I got distracted, and then I read that sentence, and then these beautiful geese flew over really low in a perfect formation, and that so low and intimate that I heard the wind in their wings first. And so it's always there. We're always being talked to. It's just how much are we expressing here I am? So I went through, I know, Pat, but it's okay. That's the thing. It's okay. So every single time is a victory. It's not every single time we don't that's a failure, or that he loves us less, or that we are less. It's every time we do, it's a victory. So then I came home and I did a meditation, and I had really interesting visions during the meditation that tied into this. And so I want to share that with you, and there's a little bit of visual drawing here, and I'm not a drawer, so you'll just have to put up with it. But I realized, and it happened in the meditation, I started out my meditation and I said, here I am. And I could feel I was getting deeper and deeper into the brain waves and myself opening up. And there was a difference between just saying, here I am, and then being empty, and then saying, here I am. And an immediate response was, the more here I am, the more the response was, I am here. Do you get that? So the more we say, here I am, the more God says, I am here. And that is totally our choice of how much here I am we are, and how much space there is for him to say, I am here. We could be here I am this much, and then I am here this much, because that's only the amount of space that's there. But the more we can open up and be a bigger here I am, by letting go of ourselves, of time, of place, and of things, and of troubles, then the more his presence grows, the more I am here on his side is. And it's a perfect balance. And that reminded me of the yin-yang symbol. In fact, I saw it. It popped, during my meditation. I said, here I am, and I heard it, I am here. And then I said, here I am more. Well, I am here more. And it just kept growing and growing. And then that image of the yin-yang symbol came in to my mind. And it went from there. So the more we are showing our side of it, the more he's showing his side of it. And we're balanced. We're becoming that oneness of what Tai Chi is a metaphor for. That we start to move as one unit, not as two separate units, not as an arm and a leg, or an eye and a left toe, but that we become co-joined, and that we're moving as one unit. So I started drawing it after this image, because the image got more dynamic, and I'll tell you that as we go. So the more we open ourselves and say, here I am, the more he responds with, I am here. So it becomes sort of like this yin-yang symbol here. Can you see that? Here I am is one side, and then the opposite of that is I am here. It's balancing each other. And then together, those two pieces working together in balance, that's when we are one. We're working as one. So I have a scripture on my computer, and it's Psalms 32:8. And so whenever I open up my computer, that's what I see. And it says, I will teach you, I will guide you with my eye. And that's been on my computer for at least 4 or 5 years. And it has different meanings as I've journeyed through life. But today, what it meant, or last week when I started discovering all this, is it says, I will teach you. Now, I know there's translation. It's a translation from a different language to a different language. But why did he say, I will teach you, instead of, I teach you and I guide you with my eye? And the word will is, in this one, I think has the different meaning. It's like our will and his will. It's not I will in the future. It's will, as in the will of me and the will of him. Do you see? Yeah, so I will, his will is going to teach me, and his will guide me with his eye. And the word I really caught me as well, because what do the two dots in the yin-yang symbol look like to you? I mean, yeah, they could be eyes, right? And so keep in mind, I had this meditation before I drew all of this out and sort of put on paper what I had experienced in the meditation. But what I experienced in the meditation was this. So first, it was here I am, and then the response of I am here, and then we joined that. We made that yin-yang symbol. But then it started to, in the meditation, in my vision, it wasn't flat like what we're seeing. It was a true sphere. And the more I gave up and said, here I am, the more I aligned with I am here, until those two eyes joined and aligned perfectly. And then, guess what? I wasn't seeing through my eye. I was seeing all the way through God's eye. So now my will was inside and aligned with his will. As if that whole yin-yang symbol became so perfectly balanced and aligned that our eyes aligned and my will was inside of his will, and then I knew what direction to go, what the meaning was behind things I was seeing. And I felt a tremendous amount of kind of mystery and awe and clarity, and like, oh, that's how it's supposed to work. So it's maybe not necessarily relinquishing our will altogether, but it's aligning aligning it so that it's in alignment with God's will, and then you see right through your eye into his eye, and then you're guided in the proper way. But those eyes can't line up. Those wills cannot line up until we are able to practice the presence of God enough to say, here I am. Whether it's in that moment or in all moments, or in meditation even, or in Tai Chi, that we are able to really be open to here I am, and then he can respond with I am here, and then you're balanced and you can move through the eye of God, being guided through his will. You had asked, well, at what point do you just give up and you're just guided by him 100% and you show no initiative? But that's where I think it's important to realize that the two dots, this is my drawing of it, and it was kind of neat how it came out, because let's see if that, because this is, so at first there was just the energy of God and that vast void of nothingness, right? And then the border around here is for us to just have some understanding, because we all need boundaries, especially children, right? So we are children. And then it wasn't enough. God wanted to create a relationship, because it's through relationship that we have understanding. And so that's when he started the creation. And everything in creation, if you read Genesis, is dividing. First he started out with just light, but then he divided the light in dark and right. And so then he, kept going, land and earth, or water and earth, and heaven and earth, and then man and woman, and so forth. But our dot here is a little ragged. I didn't do that on purpose, but I thought it was really good. And I think that we were in perfect balance and our wills were aligned. So we didn't have to try to problem solve and think, well, am I supposed to do this? Do I initiate doing this? Because it was these two dots were so well aligned with each other, as in my vision, that we didn't have to even concern ourselves, because every movement, every thought was in alignment with his will. But over time, what's happened now is that this has gotten smaller, because now we're expressing I am here so much in our lives and in our world that the human mind is trying to create solutions to our problems. And that is making this so out of balance that God is, being squeezed out. But this part here, I feel like, is the Holy Spirit that has been placed within us. Then we haven't lost that. And so I believe if we can open ourselves up and we practice what I'm talking about, and you just practice just feeling moments of being connected to God, then you are clear which initiative to take. Because your will is inside His will, and it's like that monocular vision is going right through the two dots, and you know which way to go. There is no question. He's not just saying, lay back and do nothing and I'll take care of everything, because He loves to create. He wants us to create. He wants us to create. Creating is an expression of God. But what He doesn't want us to do is to create so that He's not in the process. And is it always clear to me? No. Are my dots always aligned? No. And sometimes, I think that I've been led a certain way and it maybe wasn't the right way. But how do I know? And there's a certain pace in that. I used to look back at the decisions I made in my life and think, well, maybe if I'd listened, but I could swore that God told me to do that. But it turned out in my limited understanding to be something that was what I thought was detrimental to my life and wasn't a good decision. And I still catch myself going back and thinking, man, I'm so confused because I really thought God wanted me to do that. But this and this and this happened when I followed that. But how do we know that this and this and this that happened wasn't really in the grand scheme, in the larger scheme of things, turning out something better in the end, or turning it out just exactly in the matrix that He has laid out? But with our limited understanding, we don't. So I guess the way I can answer that is that things become more clear the better you get at practicing the presence of God in your life. And not only do they become more clear, but what I'm finding, and please know that I am still working on this as much as you all are, and as hard as all of you are, and just as far away from, where I want to be as the way you all feel too. But first of all, you have more clarity. And then secondly, the results don't matter as much. Because if you're filled with love in a moment, what else matters? And so if you practice the presence of God, and you can feel that when you're pulling a rope out of the bin, it's so peaceful, and it's a perspective that takes a load off, because then it really doesn't matter if you made the right decision or not, because you know you're loved. And I don't know, it softens things. It softens things. It just becomes less important, these things that we're agonizing over. And you begin to trust more. And when you say, here I am, in the way that you're opening up and you're trusting, then His presence, I am here, is like shifting the load off of you. And you don't feel as compelled to have to do something. It's more like faith that you'll be shown what you need to do when you need to do it. So it's more on God's agenda rather than our own. And so, yeah, I lay back and I don't do things that maybe in my previous understanding of things I would have pressed through or I would have felt an urgency for. And then if I do have to make a decision, like for this oral surgeon, for example, then I can only hope that I aligned myself enough with God and to hand it over to Him enough that I was guided properly and made the right decision. But if it turns out that it wasn't the so-called right decision, how do I know that wasn't the right decision? Even if it didn't turn out like I'm expecting it to turn out. How do I know that that's not what was supposed to happen? Like maybe that, I'm just using this as an example. This is not the truth, okay? But maybe that oral surgeon had some personal issues and he needed my presence to snap him out of that. You know, maybe there's a bigger thing there that I don't even know about, that I'm put in his path for something for him or for a tertiary even. And so I think then when you stop questioning or second guessing yourself, it's like another load is taken off of you. And I mean, really, who can navigate this world? Right? Any of us? I mean, I can't even get a plumber. You know, our hot water heater is still screwed up. And so then you have a choice. You can say, well, I made the wrong decision. I got the wrong, or just like, well, it is, you know, it's just the way it is right now. And there's just a bigger perspective of things. And so it's like, by letting go, then you can be able to be in the smaller moment by moment practicing the presence of God. You're filling yourselves with that rather than with the angst of all the things that we can't control anyway, or the decisions that we can't make and know that it's the right decision. And so just picking out a few things in your day where you can practice the presence of God and feel that. At first for me it was external, and it was just a practice of saying it and not really maybe feeling it, or it was external. Let's say, I mean, I'm talking 2 years ago, and even with the meditations, you know, I would have these things happen, but now it's starting to weave in, certainly into the meditations, but the meditation is practice ground. It's a disciplined going into the practice room, practicing these connections and these emotions. And then you bring it into your day, and you bring it into your day in very simple ways. When you're slicing an onion, those are tears that God gave you. You know, or when I'm trying to wrestle something out, which I do throughout the day, now that's my symbol or my signal to say, oh, I'm going to take this moment to practice the caressing and loving feelings of God. And then I turn it into a physical act. And then I'm rewarded because it just works. And so then that just kind of spurs you to do it more. And so find something that you can make that repeated connection with throughout the day for you personally. You know, maybe it's every time you let the dog out. I don't know. It's something that you do repeatedly throughout the day to try to use that as your trigger, if you will, to connect with and practice being in the presence of God. And do whatever it takes, whether you're imagining or fantasizing that Jesus is standing right next to you as you let the dog out and you have a little conversation with him, and then you can go on your day. But there's no prescribed way of doing this. That's what's also so beautiful. And one of the most beautiful statements that Brother Lawrence said was, just the very effort he loves. Just the effort. In other words, we don't, and in fact, he says, don't come up with fancy words and fancy prayers, and just try to feel his love. It's there. It's there for us. And really, that usurps anything else that's going on in our lives. So I really like that I have a different understanding of the yin-yang symbol and those little dots, and that we're striving for balance. And I think most of us strive for it in the wrong way. And we strive for it, I don't know. I don't even know people know how to strive for balance anymore. But we're trying to do it through our Tai Chi. And that is a lovely and wonderful way. But the Tai Chi is simply a metaphor for what the relationship is supposed to be. You know, in Tai Chi, we initiate a movement, but we're supposed to let go of that once we've initiated, and we follow the flow of it. And it's just like the water has something to come over the inertia, but then it's not directing every single molecule down the way. It flows, it goes with it. Then there might be something that swirls it and makes it go the other way. Well, that's what it is. But Tai Chi is a metaphor for aligning those two dots, those two eyes, the will. I will teach you, I will guide you. God's will teach us. God's will guide us. We only have to get our will inside of His will to be able to see through our own will and into His. And the way we do that can you imagine the yin-yang symbol as it is now in our society? That the human part, I mean, as soon as Adam and Eve, as soon as we expressed our own will, then it started to become unbalanced. Because now it was more of the human presence and less of God's presence. And now we had to turn towards that other piece to get guidance. Whereas before it was just in such perfect harmony, we didn't even have to make an effort. And now we do, and now our efforts are becoming more and more our efforts and less God's efforts. And so it's just crunching it out. And so I think that the more we say, "Here I am," the more we practice the presence of God in our most mundane activities in the day, then the more we're returning to our natural relationship and state with God. Okay, so I have the scripture then that came the next day. I didn't go looking for this, and I thought that it really... The things which you have learned and received and heard and seen in me, practice these things in daily life. And the God, who is the source of peace and well-being, will be with you. How about that? Philippians 4:9. And I promise you, I didn't look for that scripture. It just came the next day after that meditation. And that pretty much summarizes it. First of all, the word practice is right there. And it says in daily life. And the God, the source of peace and well-being, will be with you. And I think that's what it is too, is when I started to be able to do this just in little bits and pieces throughout my day, and it's much easier. It was easier to do during camping, but it was also easy to get distracted. But when I was able to turn off my own will, wrestling it out, and connect and practice the presence of God, and feel the gentleness and the caressing and the humbleness, and then have success from that, then I felt better. I had more well-being and peace. And then I wasn't worried about all these big, huge things outside of me that may or may not be in my control. So I think it doesn't really matter what it is you're asking for, but it's the intention behind it that is what's important. Yeah, the intention behind the practice. It's the 10,000 hour thing, you know, the Blink, Gladwell, Malcolm Gladwell, is that what his name is? Anyway, wrote the book Blink, and really they talk about the 10,000 hours. That's how you become an expert, or so-called be talented at something, is once you've practiced 10,000 hours. Well, but the key thing is that most people miss, because they quote this 10,000 hour thing a lot, nowadays. Well, you just haven't gotten your 10,000 hours in. But the key is those 10,000 hours have to have they have to have intention behind them. You're not just putting in the time. I mean, I could practice my instrument for 10,000 hours and play the scales and be thinking of something else. That's not it. I have to have the intention of, when I'm playing those scales, that I have a good center to every note, that I have a musical line moving from one note, even though it's a musical scale, from one note to the next note, that I have fluidity and speed and dexterity with my fingers, that my chops are moving in the right way, and that my wind and the breath, that the breath is forming this beautiful sound that's all-encompassing. All of that intention in those 10,000 hours makes me a professional player with a great deal of talent. And imagine that that's our prayer, the same thing. That every word is sweet, is in the center of the core of that word, of what it means, not just to everybody, but what that means to us. Every single word in the Lord's Prayer, or whatever it is we're praying, what that means to us personally. And that our breath behind it is full and resonating and powerful and full of our presence when we utter the words, our singular presence. So that the sound that's coming out is not just the 10,000 hours, but it's the sound that is authentic to us and is resonating our breath and our soul to God. Now that's a prayer. Yeah. And we can do it without words. We can do it when we're wrestling a rope out of the bottom of a plastic bin. Just giving in a little bit and saying, you don't even say, here I am, just to change your approach, just like, well, how would God do this? And He would do it gently. He would untangle us from that gently. Maestro at the campground, and I'd put him on a leash, and I would, hook him up on the leash and be busy doing something. I didn't need to leash him, he was really good, but just in case, had him on a leash. And sure enough, within 5 or 10 minutes, he had that leash all tangled up all around him, around his legs, wrapped around like a candy cane, around his legs and around his whole thing, and until he couldn't move. And I thought, isn't that us? That is so us, right? Under our own power, our own volition, we're tangling ourselves up into our own, leash. And then I would come over, and then I thought, is that kind of like God, gently untangling the leash around him? And, of course, I had a few choice words for Maestro. God wouldn't be like that with me, us. But I was like, come on, Maestro, and I'm untangling them and everything. And then I realized, well, what I need to do, isn't this a great metaphor? I just need to hook it up high. He needed to be connected to a higher source. And then he didn't get tangled up. Another lesson from Maestro.
Another lesson. My leash has to be higher.
And so when we practice the presence of God, we're connecting our leash to the higher source. How about that? So let's go ahead and bow our heads then. Lord, I would ask that you help us in the practice of being in your presence. And help us to realize that we don't have to stand on grand ceremony to feel your presence in every little thing in our lives. So remind us gently, caress us with your love in little moments throughout our day. to practice just feeling, being in the presence of your love. And by doing that, that we find we're nestled more and more in your love, and we are relieved of the stressors and the tangled ropes that we create for ourselves. That by connecting to you, connecting our leash to the higher source, we can move with you, and that our will aligns with your will, so that we can see from our own authentic perspective, but through your will, and navigate through our life and our day and our moment with more tenderness, more love, and with your caresses constantly present for us. So help us to say, here I am, and to hear and feel and experience your response of I am here. Amen.